Hello, everybody. This is Dr. Cole. It's Sunday afternoon, August 10th, and this will be the week 7 announcement. Everyone, this will be the 7th and last video message for the summer term for Political Science 1013 on the second 7-week schedule for summer 2025. All right, everybody, things are wrapping up. Today is Sunday the 10th. Grades are due 1 week from tomorrow, Monday the 18th. In the meantime, we have our last discussion running tomorrow and Tuesday. Maybe today and tomorrow when you all see this. Many of you will see it on Monday the 11th, I assume. But the 11th and 12th, we'll run our 5th and last discussion over a recent Supreme Court decision. For the final exam, we're working on Units 7 and 8 on the Supreme Court and Congress. And, of course, in addition to that, we have, once again, 4 articles for you to look at online. And I want to say just a word about those before we finish up today. Remember, everybody, once again, there are links in that message that should be good. Please try those links. If you have any difficulty, contact me. Please try to see about that before Friday. Okay, give yourself at least a couple of days in advance in case of any trouble. And if you are having trouble, I will get the contents of those articles to you. But please go ahead and look at them and don't wait until the last minute. Don't wait until the exam day or the day before. Okay, so tomorrow and Tuesday, as I'm speaking to you today, Sunday, Monday and Tuesday, the 11th and 12th, we'll do that discussion. Then after that, everybody, I haven't heard from many people about term papers, which is fine. Whether to do a term paper is up to you. But in any case, if you are doing one, the due date is Thursday. You really should have communicated to me well before now about your topic choice. I think I've heard from a couple of people inquiring about that. So, again, it's completely optional, but the due date is Thursday. Then the exam will be Friday the 15th. And that will be it for the summer of 2025. The exam on Friday, with grades due the following Monday. We may very well get grades in over next weekend, but they're due on Monday the 18th. So the exam will be the same format as in the past. We're covering 2 units, 2 sets of class notes. Unit 7 on the Supreme Court, Unit 8 on Congress, plus 4 articles to look at. Available for 24 hours on Friday the 15th. 45 minutes once you begin. All right? So I want to finish with Unit 7 and run very quickly through Unit 8 and then talk about those 4 articles before we go today. And that will be it for the summer term. Once again, everybody, you have more than one way to contact me if you need to, through the course website or at david.cole@opsu.edu. All right, now on the Supreme Court unit, we had gotten through just about all of it last time, except at the very end of those class notes, I discussed 5 so-called landmark Supreme Court decisions. Let's touch on those very briefly. One of them is about Brown versus the Board of Education that goes back just a couple of years before my lifetime, dealing with segregation and desegregation of the public schools. Now, previously, many school systems had been segregated. The state of Kansas made it local option, county by county. Okay, the Topeka area had practiced segregation. There were schools designated for white and for black students. One set of schools for whites, another for blacks. That was declared unconstitutional. Okay, so school systems cannot do that kind of thing anymore. Many schools are still informally segregated because residential areas are segregated, and where you go to school in the public school system depends by and large on where you live. So we're told that decades after that decision, most students still attend schools where their own race predominates. But you cannot anymore designate one set of schools for whites only, another for blacks only. Okay, that was declared unconstitutional in 1954. Now, we also discuss the Citizens United case over campaign finance regulation, in which a set of campaign finance regulations was struck down and declared unconstitutional. Some of them, some regulations were declared unconstitutional, others were not. It's a decision that opened up the way for so-called super PACs, because what the Supreme Court said was that independent expenditures, independent of any candidate's campaign or that of a political party, cannot be regulated, cannot be limited. Okay, so that provided the pretext for opening up the system to more money, which some people think is a good thing and others do not. Okay, but independent expenditures could not be regulated according to the Supreme Court's decision in the Citizens United case. We also discuss the Obergefell case. Okay, that was the same-sex marriage case, which the Supreme Court ruled that the 14th Amendment and other provisions of the Constitution, mainly the 14th Amendment, means that states have to recognize same-sex marriages. You could not deny that to a same-sex couple. And that has been the case ever since that decision came down just a decade or two ago. All right? Now then, abortion. We have to discuss Roe versus Wade in 1973 and the decision that overturned that 49 years later, the Dobbs case. All right? So, for almost half a century, the prevailing case stated that the Constitution implied a right to privacy that meant that states could not regulate the practice of abortion. Okay, the Supreme Court in 2022, the conservative majority voted to strike that down, and states now may, if they so choose, limit the right to abortion. Some states do and others do not. So it's kind of a mixed bag across the United States of America, depending on where you live. There may be fairly permissive laws about abortion, or it may be restricted fairly severely. And I believe we included a chart in the class notes showing what's the case with regard to the various states with regard to abortion. That's been the case since 2022, when the Dobbs decision came down. Now, everybody more recently, okay, just before the November 2024 election, we had the United States versus Trump case. Okay, and this dealt with the question whether the president was immune from prosecution. And the Supreme Court said in some cases, yes. Now, this has been interpreted widely as giving broad prerogative to presidents, including but not limited to President Trump. Just how broad the prerogative is open to some dispute. You have to read the decision very carefully. The majority seemed to feel that if you did not give the president considerable immunity from prosecution, that would inhibit the president from doing his or her job. So what they did was they divided presidential acts into three categories. There's no immunity from unofficial acts, and the court was quick to say not everything the president does is an official act. Okay. For instance, presumably something the president did as a candidate for election or re-election would not be considered an official act. So that conceivably could be prosecuted. Okay. Official acts were divided into two categories. Those related to core constitutional functions and those not so closely related. For core functions, there is absolute immunity. For other official functions, there is a presumption of immunity that presumably could be overcome. Okay, but there's a presumption of immunity. Conceivably, that could be overcome. So there's a broad immunity for official presidential acts. For some of those acts considered core constitutional powers and duties, there is absolute immunity. For others, there is a presumption of immunity that could conceivably be overcome. Okay? Justice Sotomayor, in dissent, speculated that the president could order the Navy SEALs to assassinate a political opponent, and that could not be prosecuted. The only way to, in that case, uh, punish the president would be to impeach and remove him or her. Okay. Not everyone agrees, but Justice Sotomayor did speculate about that in her dissent. Opponents of the president tend to look at this decision as giving the president almost complete carte blanche. Okay, but maybe it's not 100% complete if you look at what the decision said closely. Okay, everybody, we're going to have to be with you a little while longer today because that's the end of Unit 7. We want to go ahead and look at Unit 8 on Congress, and then we wind it up by discussing those 4 articles you asked to look at online for the exam, in addition to the class notes for Units 7 and 8. All right, now, in Unit 8, we start out by talking about the kinds of people who do and do not serve in Congress, like elected officials in general, they tend to be prominent professional people, not 100%, but largely professional people. And for the United States Congress, these will be people who have, by and large, run for office before, maybe for the state legislature, or perhaps a position of some kind in their county or city. Okay. We include some discussion of demographics. They call Congress a white male preserve. It's not quite the white male preserve that it used to be, but it's not 100% perfect demographic snapshot of the United States, and we discuss why that might be. We go on to look at the members of the House of Representatives from Oklahoma and how their districts differ one from another. Okay? Because it's a good thing to know who your representatives in Congress are. One thing we do at the very beginning of this set of class notes is we talk about Oklahoma and the states surrounding it. At OPSU, we're right at the confluence of 5 states, Oklahoma and 4 others. And insofar as possible, we want everybody to know who their representatives are in Congress, especially your member of the House of Representatives. For reasons that will become clear, it's perhaps more important to know that than who your senators are. Okay? But you should know who's representing you in Congress. All right, now after that, everybody, study of Congress is divided into 2 parts, roughly. Okay. Congress at home and Congress in Washington, D.C. By at home, we mean the member and relations with his or her constituents, including running for office. Right? Now, in the corridors of power in Washington, D.C., we look there at the leadership positions in Congress, the committee and subcommittee system, the procedure by which a bill becomes law. All right, so first things first, we need to be aware running for Congress is kind of a free-for-all. Okay, when a seat comes open, any number of people may run in party primaries to try to win that and get the right to run in the general election as either the Democratic or the Republican nominee. Okay, the Democratic and Republican national parties have relatively little to do with it. People have to take an initiative and go out on their own, raise money, advertise, make appearances to try to win the nomination of their party for the general election. Okay. Now, there's a couple things worth noting, everybody. Few seats are competitive anymore. Out of the 435 in the House of Representatives, most of them have been drawn in such a way as to be safe for either a Democrat or a Republican. Now, estimates will vary. Perhaps between 50 and 80 of them are competitive seats that could go either way. The rest of them are not. The Constitution says the states get to draw the districts. Okay? And for most states, that will be the state legislatures that do that job. And it's sort of a case of to the victor goes the spoils. Whoever controls that state legislature, whichever party, will try to draw those boundaries in such a way as to favor their party. They may try to create as many safe seats as they can, but they'll try to create more safe seats for members of their own party. and maybe not so many for those in the other party. Now, you will see in there a discussion of the concept of gerrymandering. And that means the practice of drawing the lines, the boundaries of a district in such a way as to favor one political party or candidate or the other. That's a widespread practice. The Supreme Court has said that there's no constitutional violation involved in gerrymandering. Now, just as an aside, everybody, students may have heard that there's a big controversy going on about redrawing of district lines for the House of Representatives in Texas. Okay? And the reason why? Well, the House of Representatives is very closely divided. Elections are coming up, the midterm elections in November 2026. Trump and the Republicans appear to be afraid that they might lose power, lose control of the House of Representatives to the Democrats, which would mean there might be 2 years of investigations into the Trump administration and maybe even an attempt to impeach him. Okay, although the Senate would have to remove him, and that might be very difficult to do, but he could at least be impeached, if not removed. Okay? So they want to redraw the boundaries for the House of Representatives in Texas in such a way as to create 5 more safe Republican seats. And maybe that would give the Republicans a safe margin nationwide when the elections are held in November 2026. The trouble is, traditionally, this is only done once a decade. Once we take the census, which will be coming up again in 2030, right after that, at the first opportunity, states will generally review and perhaps revise their district boundaries. One reason for that is the populations of the states will shift. Some states may lose representatives and others will gain. Okay, so if your state loses or gains a seat or two, then of course those boundaries have to be withdrawn. It's unusual to do it in between the censuses, but that's what the Texas Republicans in the state legislature are trying to do, and there's a big controversy about it. The Democrats in the legislature, by and large, left the state to try to keep them from doing business. Furthermore, other states are talking about redrawing before next year's midterm elections. Okay, Republican states will try to do it in such a way as to favor their candidates, create more Republican seats, and Democrats will do the same in those states. The problem is, in a state like California and others, steps have been taken to try to limit the gerrymandering by turning the district boundary drawing over to an independent commission. Okay? But of course, a state could change its laws to do away with that. It looks like we've got tit-for-tat retaliation with each side, each state trying to do what they can to create the maximum number of safe seats for their party. So there may not be very many competitive seats at all left once these states get through with this process. So it remains to be seen what will happen. The Texas Democrats are doing what they can to stop the Republicans from doing this, but whether they will be successful or not in doing that remains to be seen. Students may have heard the governor of Texas is talking about having the FBI arrest these people. Many of them have fled to the state of Illinois for the time being. So we will have to wait and see what happens with that. It's noteworthy, everybody, that it's relatively rare for a House incumbent to lose an election, a re-election campaign. Okay? I tell students, once you get elected to the House of Representatives, generally you're safe for a decade or more. And then many other things may happen. You may choose at that point to run for higher office, or you may get tired of it and simply quit. Or you could commit a political blunder that leaves you vulnerable to a challenger, and so you get beat in your campaign for re-election. But the most recent figures I've seen in 2024, 96% of House incumbents got re-elected. That would mean that no more than a handful of them were defeated. Now, this mostly concerns the House of Representatives. Elections for the Senate are a little different. Only 1/3 of them are up every 2 years, so it takes 3 consecutive elections to replace the whole Senate. Okay. Senate elections are more like presidential elections because there are only 100 of them. Every one of those seats in the Senate is a big prize. national organizations, lobbying groups, will get more involved in the Senate elections than the races for the House of Representatives. The people in the House are relatively anonymous. There's so many of them. The ones in the Senate, well, they say everybody in the Senate is presidential timber. Presidential candidates often come from the Senate because there are only 100 of them. Everybody, right now, the Republicans have the majority in the Senate, and it would be very difficult to dislodge them because so many of the relatively small states with small populations are so-called red states, and there are many of those. So it's being speculated that the Democrats have a good chance to take over the House in 2026, but not so much the Senate. Of course, that remains to be seen, but that's the speculation that you will hear in the press. Now, everybody, it's worth noting, why is it that these incumbents in the House of Representatives get reelected over and over and over again? Well, they have an edge in fundraising because lobbying organizations, pressure groups, interest groups know the incumbent's record in getting reelected over and over again. So they're liable to give money to the incumbents rather than a challenger, because the challengers are so unlikely to get into office. Furthermore, members can do things like what we call in the class notes casework and pork barrel. Now, casework is the reason you need to know who your member of the House is, because members employ a fairly large staff. Much of what they have that staff do is deal with problems that their constituents might be having. Very often it might be a constituent who had been getting a regular benefits check, but some happen to interrupt that benefit. So you open a casework file and intervene with the appropriate agency, that might be the Social Security Administration, and try to get that matter resolved. Or maybe it's someone whose family is divided. Some of the family is in the United States and others are overseas, and you need help trying to help members of your family immigrate to the United States to unify the family. Okay? So you would get your member of the House to try to intervene with the immigration authorities. Maybe your tax return has been audited and you don't know why, you think it's unfair. And you would have your member or staff try to intervene with the IRS. Okay? Another thing they do, rising high school seniors, if any of them want to go to West Point or Annapolis or Colorado Springs, the service academies, okay, those nominations are made through the offices of the members of the House of Representatives. So there's all kinds of favors that members can do for individual constituents, and they feel that by doing that they build up goodwill, get a good reputation for providing constituent service, and that helps them to get reelected regardless of where they stand on the issues of the day, right versus left. So they all have a big incentive to do that kind of thing. Pork barrel, you might say, means casework on a larger scale. Pork barrel refers to spending projects that members want put in the budget so that they can take credit for them. Okay, it might be all kinds of things, anything from opening a new post office or keeping one from closing, to all sorts of installations, maybe getting a new weapon system built in your district for the Department of Defense. Maybe a new installation of some bureaucratic unit of the federal government operating in your district in such a way as to bring in money and bring in jobs. The idea is, you paid your taxes and your member did all that he or she could to bring some of your tax money back to the district. Okay, and the projects, the items for which that money is spent, often are described as pork barrel spending. And the origins of these terms are discussed in the class notes. Some of them are colorful and go back a long, long way in history in some cases. All right, we go on then to talk about Congress in Washington, D.C., in the corridors of power in the U.S. Capitol. We talk about the leadership positions, most importantly, the Speaker of the House, who at this time is Mr. Mike Johnson, representing a district in Shreveport, Louisiana. He is the Speaker of the House and has been for a couple of years now. We discuss in the class notes what happened to his predecessor, okay, which was a matter of a big controversy, and the House went without a speaker and could not transact business for a couple of weeks. That's recent enough that I've included that long drawn out story in the class notes. It's sort of reflective of some of the things that are going on in Washington, D.C. these days. The Speaker is the presiding officer of the House as a whole and also leader of his or her party. Okay? In the Senate, there's nothing like the Speaker. Each party has a majority leader and a minority leader, and there are positions by those names in the House too. The House Majority Leader will be second in command to the Speaker. Okay? The Senate does not depend on a position like the Speaker as much as the House does. In the Senate, the tradition is one of unlimited debate, which opens up the possibility of the Senate filibuster that students will have heard about. Possibility for one member to bring the business of the House of Representatives to a stop, the Senate, stop the business of the Senate. Practically speaking, these days, it takes 60 votes rather than 50 or 51 to get a bill passed, because that's the number of votes needed to invoke cloture and stop a filibuster in the Senate. Okay? These days, many bills are filibustered almost as a matter of routine. Okay? Some people think there's a question about the future of the institution of the filibuster, but some people say it's something that makes the Senate different from the House. The committee and subcommittee system, you will notice, parallels the structure of the federal bureaucracy. Now, everybody, in the Unit 8 links announcement, you'll find links to Representative Lucas's website. Frank Lucas, he's the member who represents the Oklahoma Panhandle and a good bit of the rest of western Oklahoma, and the website of the House Agriculture Committee. It would be interesting to poke around those websites for a few minutes, and I tried to provide a guide to it in that announcement that was called Unit 8 Links. Okay. Now, there are some committees with broader responsibilities. Okay. There are appropriations committees and budget committees in both chambers. There is the Senate Finance Committee and the House Ways and Means Committee. Okay. These committees have broad responsibilities with regard to budgeting, spending, and taxation, especially finance in the Senate and the House Ways and Means Committees. Those are the tax committees of Congress. There is a Rules Committee in each chamber. The House Rules Committee is especially important for reasons that you will see as you read through the class notes. Okay. The process by which a bill becomes law under so-called regular order means that a bill is filed and is assigned to a subcommittee in both the Senate and the House. It will go from the subcommittee to the full committee to the floor of either the House or the Senate. In the House, there is the extra step of going through the House Rules Committee, which must pass a rule for each bill that goes to the floor of the House, governing debate and amendments. They have to do that because by tradition, debate in the Senate is unlimited, but in the much larger House of Representatives, there has to be limits on debate. Okay? Each chamber has to pass the bill if it's going to be passed in exactly the same form, with all the I's dotted and T's crossed in exactly the same way. And if at first they can't do that, the bill may have to go to a House-Senate conference committee and then back to the floor of the House and the Senate. Now, everybody, there's been a lot of talk and discussion about how things have been going in Congress the past decade or two because the two political parties are so evenly and bitterly divided. That means that regular order that we just described to you still is observed for routine legislation. But for much legislation, they bypass regular order, and that would apply to things like the budget and the recently passed Big Beautiful Bill, so-called. President Trump called it that, and they made that the official name of the bill, the Big Beautiful Bill Act. Okay. We don't have nearly as much bipartisanship in Congress as we used to. That means that these big bills, generally, instead of going through regular order, the details are hammered out between the White House and the leadership of the majority party, especially in both the House and the Senate. And at that point, the bill will be presented directly to the floor without having gone through the committee and subcommittee system. Okay. That's how big, high-stakes legislation generally is taken care of these days. Although for more routine, maybe not quite so highly visible legislation, the committee and subcommittee system is still there and still functions, but not for the biggest, highest stakes bills anymore. Okay. Now, as we bring that set of notes to a close, we discuss the institution of the filibuster that we had mentioned before, the budget process, okay, the process of so-called reconciliation. Okay. If a bill is classified as budgetary, it cannot be filibustered. Okay. And it's up to the parliamentarian of the Senate to decide what's budgetary and what's not. Okay. So you will find some discussion in there of the budget process and the reconciliation process. Very often in recent years, everybody, we have not been able to get the budget passed on time. The fiscal year is supposed to start on October 1. The press is full of reports right now that they may not be able to do that, and there may even be a government shutdown for a couple of weeks at least before they can get a spending bill passed. Very often what happens is they can't agree on anything anymore except a so-called continuing resolution, which generally means simply keep on spending money at the same rate you did at the last budget until we can get a new budget figured out. And that may take several months into the fiscal year. That's the way it very often has gone the past few years, the past decade or two, it's fair to say. Everybody also look at the distinction I draw. We talk about the great British statesman Edmund Burke and what he said about the legislator as trustee or delegate. Be sure you understand those terms and which of those roles the contemporary member of Congress is more likely to fill. And then we try to bring the course as a whole to a close with some comments about the kinds of challenges that the system as a whole is facing as we look at where we stand in the first few months of the Trump administration in the middle of the year 2025. All right, everybody, then for the exam, you have these 4 articles to look at. You have an article about the Supreme Court as a whole and the challenges that it faces from President Trump and the Trump administration. The president sometimes has gotten upset with the Supreme Court and has issued messages to that effect on the X platform, formerly Twitter, and also his own Truth Social platform. Okay, so take a look at that. There's also an article about Associate Justice Amy Coney Barrett. Okay. Well, Trump nominated Amy Barrett just at the end of his term before the 2020 elections. Her reputation is that of a conservative, although there's times she's gotten off the train and disappointed the people who had been her conservative admirers. So look at what Professor Shapiro, the author of that article, says in that piece about Justice Barrett. We have a piece about the kind of deals that were cut behind the scenes to get the big, beautiful bill passed. Then we have a piece about the Senate and why many people are getting out of the Senate and declining to run for re-election, because they say the Senate has become kind of an unpleasant place to work. Okay. Those are the 4 articles you asked to access online. Okay. The links are in the announcement that I sent out. Okay. So please try those well in advance of the exam and contact me in case of any problem. They really shouldn't be. But contact me if you cannot access that material and I will get it to you. All right then, everybody. Discussion Monday and Tuesday, the 11th and 12th. Term papers due the 14th. Exam on the 15th. Grades will be turned in between the 15th and the 18th. Okay, once again, everybody, any questions, problems, or issues, contact me at david.cole@opsu.edu. I think there are a couple of people who may need to make up exams. I sent messages out to that effect. So if that applies to you, please contact me, and we'll try to get your exam in so we can get that in time to turn in grades. If you take your exams, you have a much better chance of getting through the course successfully. So I hope this has been an eye-opening experience for you. Please contact me as needed through the course website or at david.cole@opsu.edu. Thanks a lot. I hope you have enjoyed it, and it's been a profitable 7 weeks for you this summer of 2025.